Welcome back to the First Time Fantasy Podcast. Once again, I'm RJ Geibel here with my co-host Rick,
Yo.
and today we have two more special guests here. We have Lucas Earhart
Hey,
of
how's it going?
of Green Dice Productions Games, one of those two.
Green Dice Games, Xenu Games. It's on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah. And
You'll
then
find
we
it.
we also have we'll link everything, and we also have Matt Davis, also of Xenu Games.
What's up, guys?
Uh,
Yo, I'm
they
ready to talk
have
about some football.
these guys have two great podcasts, the Pretty Good podcast and the Deadliest Warrior podcast. Both of them great content. Check them out. And then, like I said, Lucas also has a gaming channel as well. So today we're going to be breaking down the NFC North. Some good teams, some not so good teams.
Yep.
We decided to break the order down into what we think will be worst to best. And so, Rick, take us into the Lions' den for Detroit.
They don't deserve a nickname this year. They're that bad. So, the only fantasy relevant player that the Lions have, one of two, is obviously going to be TJ Hawkinson. Unfortunately for them, they shipped out pretty much all of their starting receivers. And, I mean, I'm not going to be shocked if Hawkinson ends up with pretty much the best offensive numbers in total when it comes to yards, catches, targets, pretty much everything. He's one of the few returning players there. And then, of course, you also have DeAndre Swift. So, in short, if you'd like a Lions receiver or player, grab one of those two. To break it down a little bit more, though, it's kind of interesting at running back. They obviously have Swift, who should be the starter, but they did go and sign Jamal Williams, who was formerly with the Packers. And looking at their stats, they're actually pretty similar. They both missed a few games last season, but for the most part, they took a similar amount of attempts. They have a similar amount of rushing yards. The only real difference here is that Swift had a few extra touchdowns. And some of the headlines coming out of camp, the coaches have already said that they'll ride the hot hand, which isn't really shocking for an NFL team nowadays. And also that they don't have a problem with using a 1-2 punch there. So if you do go after Swift, maybe he drops a few spots or you get him below his ADP. Personally, I don't want to. I believe he's going around 14th, 15th running back, which isn't too terrible. Not a too high of a price to pay, depending on when you get him in your draft, but not someone I'm looking for. Williams ended up playing obviously behind Aaron Jones last year and a much better offense in Green Bay. So it's going to be a pretty big change of pace for him with the Lions obviously trading away Stafford. They also lost, like I mentioned, most of their receivers in Marvin Jones and Kenny Golladay and replaced them with Tyrell Williams, who missed all of last season, and Brashard Perryman, who was with the Jets. They don't really have much depth when it comes to receiver. And then when you get rid of your starting quarterback, I don't know what they're going to do there. I mean, their receiving core is essentially decimated, minus Hawkinson. I wouldn't consider anyone on their roster a sleeper. Maybe just one of their receivers. You could take a late flyer, but you
I'm
could
about
probably
to fall asleep hearing
yeah,
about
right.
him.
It's pretty bad. Like there isn't really much here. The good news is if you do want one of their receivers, you won't have to draft them because no one's going to take them. So you can look grabbing them waivers like during the season. If you see a good matchup, go for it. But yeah, Hawkinson and Swift, that's about it, dude. There's not much more to that team right now. It's pretty bad.
Where is Swift going?
I believe he is ranked.
What is his ADP?
ADP, he's currently going at 37, 16th running back right now. Right behind Montgomery's going right before him. Miles Sanders is going right after him.
Yeah, I would rather have Swift than Montgomery, which we will also talk about him soon.
Don't worry,
be
he's
interesting.
coming up.
Yeah, I don't know. That'll be interesting, but I don't know. Swift right there on a team bad.
I had a lighting change because my wife has to do the laundry.
Perfect.
So, hey,
But
gotta get them drawers cleaned. You know what I'm saying?
what Detroit should do is different than what they're going to do. They finally have a good running back. Use him. Instead, they have Williams, and they're gonna probably do a 1-2 punch when they should just use Williams as a change of pace back. If I'm drafting based off of what I think they should do, then I am okay with Swift in that position. If I'm drafting based off of what I think that terrible franchise will do, then I would not like to take Swift
Yeah,
that
it
early.
doesn't
So-
sound like he's like the outright number one, and you probably see timeshare, or at least at the very best, like Williams for sure is going to steal some touchdowns, like no doubt.
What they should do is they should just sell that team to another city.
So no mention of Jared Goff. You don't think Jared
Oh.
Goff's going to be relevant at all, Rick?
If you are in a super flex league or
No.
a 2, maybe 3, 4, 5 quarterback league where you just need someone to stick on your bench, sure, but if they
Yeah, I
had
do
those
I do
returning
recall
receivers,
him-
maybe, but not with the guys they have, you know.
I do recall him being like a streaming option when he was actually playing like decent for the Rams. Keep in mind that's on like a Super Bowl team, you
Yeah.
know, with a good coach and a lot of good players. And Lions, yeah, there's a lot to be desired there. I guess the most interesting guy is T.J. Hawkinson, and he might be the most interesting player of the draft, like because of the way the tight end field is shaping out to be. It seems every year the paradigm of the tight end field just gets more and more extreme, where there's like one guy you have to spend like your first draft pick on and he'll be good, right? And there's like a couple other higher end guys that you know you can count on. I think this year we've got 3, right? I would say there's probably a tier break between Travis Kelce and then like Darren Waller and George Kittle, because there's a little more risk maybe with those two, but you're probably going to see some really good numbers. And then there's always those mid-round guys that are like, hey, you can spend your 5th round pick on this guy and he might turn out to be great, or we might have been better off just sifting through the garbage at the end of the draft.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
well,
much.
that's the discussion itself. Is a tight end even worth investing in?
Yeah. That's the
itself.
thing. If you can
The
justify
top tier,
it,
yeah.
if you
Yes,
can, but if you can justify a Hawkinson or someone at whatever ADP, or if they happen to fall in your draft, it might make sense. Yeah, if you can get them like round 6, but
This year's weird. Like, is like a Travis Kelce? He was throwing up some serious numbers last year, but is that worth throwing out like a good like running back 1 position?
I think if
for
you
some
can get the
people it seems to be the case.
performance-
Yeah.
Yeah, if you can get the performance you did last year, I think it's worth it, because Travis Kelce pulled in at like up until like the final week. I think he was the number 1 leading overall receiver.
Isn't that
in the
annoying?
league. Which is crazy. So absolutely, you want to take that guy, because not only are you getting one of the best players, but you're getting a huge positional advantage over anybody you're playing that week. You know, like, well, this guy, whoever I'm playing, is probably going to put up like 7 points at the tight end, and I know my guy's going to put up like over 20.
Yeah.
A little more up and down with like Kittle and Waller, but you're going to get some of that domination. Hawkinson is so weird because he is in a position to get just a whole lot of targets thrown his way, and the potential to get a lot of, more importantly, touchdowns. You know, if you can get those, I don't care if it's at the end of the game and the Lions just had the worst game of the season, as long as Hawkinson is catching 1 touchdown, you're celebrating. You're like, oh, my terrible tight end did good. So
He's wide open. He catches it. It's a touchdown. The game ends
Yeah.
49-7.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
he's
he
got
did
the factor of just being a big dude.
yeah,
I
to
think
give
I checked his stats. He's like 6'5", 248 or something, and so there's always a chance that like garbage time, which the Lions are probably going to have a lot of this year because they're not a good team. There's always a chance that Goff gets to throw like something in the last like 3 minutes, and Hawkinson's going to snatch that like touchdown, and
yeah, I
you know,
think
that might be enough for you that week.
I think like one other difference too is like Goff got to play on a team that had a good defense, whereas the Lions don't. So Hawkinson's kind of already set up to get a ton of volume with them missing out on some of those receivers. And then if the Lions do get forced into throwing the ball because they're playing from behind, Hawkinson did already have 100. I think he had 101 targets last season. So you could. I wouldn't be shocked if we saw an increase closer to like Kelsey-ish numbers. It doesn't mean he's going to put up the same amount of fantasy points, but at least you might have some volume for it to be like worth maybe your 5th round pick or something like that.
Fantasy, sometimes volume is just like the key.
Yep.
You know, it's just pushing the meat through the grinder and getting you like the points you need. You remember when Isaiah Crowell was like a first round running back on the that historically bad Browns team? Yeah. The Crow.
I think I had him like in the first year I played in this league.
Just a wonderful example of like terrible team, not that great of a player, but like just sheer volume can make him relevant for fantasy.
Sometimes that's enough.
You can get some real bangers off those like garbage teams sometimes, just off volume.
Yeah. If you can find the one guy that gets every target.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're gonna pick someone, it's Hawkinson. I don't think Swift is bad, but it's just not. I don't think that situation is set up for him to actually succeed as like the RB1. I think he'll be good, but I think he could finish outside of the top 20 because Jamal Williams
him as like a 3rd round running back. I think is a great way to phrase it, because it's just like he belongs there with like Emont, who we'll probably talk about in this episode, and Chris Carson is like going around there too, which is kind of ridiculous. I know you guys talked about.
I think
that
he's going. He's going even lower. He's like 20th wide receiver, 20th running back off the board. I think 19 right now.
Mm-hmm.
Well, speaking of shitty teams,
Lucas. They have him at 19.
Lucas, let's move on to your team.
All right.
Let me start bear cave.
If only they were that cool. Sorry if you're from Chicago, you can have your baseball team, but I'm sorry. Not a big fan of the Bears. Never have been. The whole NFC North, I think, is honestly one of the not as good matchups between like the 4 teams.
Yeah.
I feel like there's, a clear cut between the top 50, bottom 50.
I saw a stat the other day. It was Aaron Rodgers' record against all of the NFC North teams.
I'm sure
he has like
stupid good.
I think he has like it's like 16-1 or something like that in all the divisional games. It's insane. Like
yikes. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
The Bears are plus 5,000 to win the Super Bowl. That's in the bottom 3rd. I don't think they have. There's a little bit of like contingency this year where people are all, some people are getting excited about, especially we're going to address the QB situation in Chicago. And there is potential with their wide receiver and running game. I think a big point of this year is the QB, which I'm going to get into here in a minute. Let me give you my top 3 positions, which number 1 you could probably pick out. David Montgomery. He's been good. He did well last year. The only upside to him, I mean, he's 23 overall in ESPN. He has a pretty much like a big roof. He got 1,070 yards last year, 4.3 average, 8 touchdowns, 1 fumble. That's completely normal. He had his concussion last year, which he recovered fine from. Off of like my mock drafts that I've done, which I did 1 so far, he was going third-ish round, maybe like 4th round if you're lucky. And one of the things I found was really interesting. The coach this year said that he was looking at 20 carries per game, which is pretty insane. I think last year he got like 16.5, which is still pretty high volume. And I think if you're going to pick him, he's going to be, I'm not going to say he's your number 1 running back for sure, because there's plenty up top that'll get you better numbers. I'm going to say he's a solid like number 2 running back. His backup, Cohen, he's all right. There's not a ton of depth at running and the Bears this year. So
is there an injury? Didn't Tariq Cohen get injured?
I'm not sure. Was that like
last year he tore his ACL.
Oh yeah. I thought you meant like
previously.
Recently, but he missed the entire last season because of the ACL. Which he's coming back.
He's going to be back like until
they're talking. Yeah, I mean he's going to, but they're talking him actually as like a sleeper, but I don't think so. There's not much depth at running. I think Montgomery's going to be their go-to guy. So yeah, solid. Pick him up second round if you can. Allen Robinson as number 2 this year. He's 31 overall. Him and Montgomery are pretty much the only significant players off the Bears this year, besides the whole QB situation, which we'll get to. And I mean, he is ceiling for doing pretty good. 2020, he had 102 recorded passes, about 1,200 yards, 12.3 yard average, is pretty good, but only 6 TDs, which is kind of low for what you'd expect. I would say he's probably like 4th round, maybe 5th round if you're lucky pickup. You might see like a 3rd round pickup, but if they do, they're probably not a good drafter. I think, but that leads the huge question mark for this team here is going to be what are they going to do with the QB, because they have Andy Dalton, and I'm one of the biggest naysayers against Andy Dalton, the Red Rocket himself.
Rick,
Got to represent, dude.
Oh yeah, I just don't think he's that great, and I think I think you're going to see him for week 1 and 2 maybe, and then they got Justin Fields. Is the big thing, you know, one of the he's from Ohio State. I think he played in like Georgia before that, and everyone is calling this guy like the next big thing. You look up anything about the Bears, it's like, oh, could Justin Fields be, you know, like the next Tom Brady? Could he be like the next? Here's my prediction, and you hear it first here. I'm saying he's like the next Cam Newton. He comes strong out the gate. He looks real good, you know, has potential, maybe even gets to see a Super Bowl one day, but he's going to lose it. He's going to lose that Super Bowl. And he's going to fall into obscurity.
That poor guy.
I mean, his college numbers are pretty solid. I'm not going to pretend and lie like I know everything about him from college, but everything I've seen looks pretty solid. And I think that is going to be like the tail of the tape for the Bears this year, is whether once Justin Fields takes over and they acknowledge that Andy Dalton is just like a burning out, dying star, how well he can actually do.
that's a little too kind for Andy Dalton.
Yeah. I mean, he's not great.
I mean, so they got rid of Trubisky, so thank God. That was step 1. But you're forgetting about the hero Nick Foles back there still, Lucas. But
I'm not even gonna acknowledge that.
The Colts got to pick up Nick Foles.
Yeah.
And Wentz got injured.
As soon as that Wentz injury came through, that was reunite Foles. And it's just like we'll see.
So my notes here, I have like kind of in-depth notes, and then next to Demont, it just says he's okay. I am.
I think that's pretty accurate, honestly.
I mean, he's solid. He puts up.
No, he is solid. I don't trust anything on that team. I like Allen Robinson a lot, but you don't know who's throwing him the ball. If it's Andy Dalton, not good. If it's somehow Nick Foles, possibly worse than Andy Dalton. And Justin Fields is still new.
I think he's their best hope. I think whether Nick Foles miraculously comes through or Andy Dalton starts, you're going to see him for like week 1 or 2, and then it's going to be all Justin Fields from there. But I don't see more than like 7 wins this year for that team, even if they pull like that 7 wins out of their ass. I mean, what were they last year? Like
they were 8-8 last year.
It was like 8, yeah. I think it's going to be worse, honestly. I mean, everyone's calling him like the big. I don't buy into it.
If I could talk, I think the hinge point of this team is Justin Fields and how Justin Fields starts to perform his rookie season. The only reason I'm not like immediately jumping on it is because it's a rookie year, and so even like a really good player can have sort of an up and down rookie season, but I don't know. I think Justin Fields has a lot of talent. I think he's got a lot of capability, and if we can, as fantasy players, can get somebody behind center in Chicago that is good, I think you see Allen Robinson's numbers go way up. Robinson's always had a really solid floor, and he's always had to deal with just terrible quarterbacking. Like, I think he had like Bortles when he was down in Jacksonville, and then for the past couple years in Chicago, he's had disaster that's been like the Mike Glennon, Mitch Trubisky, Nick Foles carousel. Right. And now it's Andy Dalton. And they said Andy Dalton's going to be the starter. I think that 1 to 2 week window is probably good. I haven't looked at the Bears' schedule.
I'll touch on that because I was actually going to bring that up.
If they catch a solid L at the beginning of the season, they're definitely ripping Andy off and just putting Fields out there, because usually how these things work is they ride that hot hand until the veteran cools down. And I'm sorry that it has to be Andy Dalton and not Tyrod Taylor like it always is for every other team. But Andy Dalton, he's the veteran they're throwing in there, and I just don't see him with the performances he's given the last couple of years. I don't see him putting up the kind of stats or wins that are going to make the coaching staff like keep their star player that the whole fan base is burning to see on the bench for very long.
Yeah, I came out the gate pretty strong. It's like, oh, this guy hates Justin Fields. I don't. I wish him all the best.
Cam Newton,
I just
if
don't.
he's the next Cam Newton for fantasy purposes, that's great, because Cam Newton's like,
even for career purposes, you could do a
Right,
lot worse
sure.
than that.
Oh, yeah. I'm just saying, I don't think he has enough depth. If he stays in Chicago, I don't think he has. The team just never has enough depth. Never has. It's just not like where I think a champion's going to be born.
Yeah, to
That's
touch on
fair.
to touch on the schedule real quick, I think they would be. I mean, Andy Dalton's not the answer, but that's what they want to tell you is, I guess, at least, yeah, maybe he starts a few games, but they actually have a kind of an easy schedule to start the season. You get a Rams defense who they lost a bunch of starters, then they play the Bengals. Browns is probably a little tougher, but then they get to play the Lions and Raiders. If you're going to play Fields, I mean, why not give him some of those easy teams to actually like implement some of that offense with and actually get some like legitimate reps and not just practice reps?
You think Andy Dalton will show up for that revenge game against the Bengals?
That's true. Yeah, that's what they got to play him the first 2 weeks. He gets the revenge game in, and then they go to Fields so he can get destroyed by the Browns defense, and then they can put Foles in for against the Lions, and he'll look really good. Because
see, the Bears are just they're messing up this quarterback thing again. I mean, I don't think Trubisky was ever going to be good, but instead of just saying Justin Fields is our guy, or we have all the confidence in him, they're like, you know what, we trust Andy Dalton more than him. And it's just going to kill his confidence.
I didn't understand the signing when you get rid of Trubisky, you still keep Foles around, and then you do draft the younger guy. So let him just play behind like Foles for a year. You're not going to be good even if Fields is your starter for this season. So if anything, just have Foles play. You draft Fields, and then the next few seasons is something you have to look forward to. Like, what was the point of getting Andy Dalton when you already had like someone that Fields could sit behind? Doesn't make any sense to me, but.
That's
Say,
kind of where I'm
let
at.
Fields loose, baby. Let that cannon fire.
I want to see him. I want to see him do good. I just don't think it's going to happen. I really tried to get like a number 3 pick from the Bears too, and it's really, really difficult. The next name I can come up with is nothing special. Just Darnell Mooney. That is.
Yeah, you're
he's
sifting
not even
through
great.
like
Yeah,
wide receivers. I remember playing.
That's like 11th round pick maybe that you're even looking at for him.
I remember playing that little patty cake game a couple years ago where it was like, well, I don't know, you can get Anthony Miller or Taylor Gabriel, and I'm like, no, you're better off. You're better off like burning your own hand on the stove.
The only
like
thing-
putting those guys in your flex spot, because
The only thing I could say about
Darnell
Darnell
you're
Mooney,
sitting there and you're hoping for that deep pass that Trubisky's going to throw, and then you get like a 0.1.
The only thing I could say about Mooney is he's going into his second year, so he doesn't have like a bad track record. Essentially, he had not a great QB throwing to him, so he could potentially be a quote-unquote sleeper. He could, say Justin Fields comes out and he does really well. I mean, this guy is still kind of new. He had 61 receptions last year with 632 yards. It's not great, but it could significantly go up this year. He might be like a late round that if you pick him up, like 12th round or something, could be like a solid flex or something. So I mean, that's why I put him as number 3.
There was only, I'm sorry, not to cut you off. There was only one other thing I meant to touch on earlier when we were talking running backs for them. With Cohen possibly, it sounds like he might be ready for the season, but they might, with an ACL tear, they could ease him back in. I believe they recently said he's still a few weeks out. Damian Williams actually signed with the Bears, and he opted out last season. I wouldn't be completely shocked if, I wouldn't say draft him as like deep sleeper, or maybe you can grab him off waivers after a few weeks, but wouldn't be shocked if Cohen's not ready for the season and he ends up like taking over some of those reps that Cohen would otherwise see. And I mean, if they give Montgomery those 20 plus touches that they say they're going to, it might not matter anyways, but with like how sketchy that those running backs are, Williams could end up being a decent grab throughout the season.
Yeah, I forgot that he existed. I did not know that he signed with the Bears.
He was the highest scoring fantasy running back for the Chiefs in 2019.
I wrote down something funny about Mooney too, to touch on him again. He was targeted 22 times at 20 plus yards last year. Only 17 were classified as uncatchable.
Nice.
So of the 5 that were catchable, he caught 4. So
all right,
it's pretty solid, like 4 out of 5. But I thought
good.
it was funny because I looked it up and he was like, "Oh, he was targeted 22 times at 20 plus yards, and 17 were uncatchable." So I mean, maybe it could be a big turnaround year for Mooney there.
So Matt, do you have any funny transitions into the Vikings like you did for the Bear Cave and Lions Den?
Lions Den. I mean, no. Let's get on the long ship and sail to Valhalla.
Yo, till Valhalla, brother.
Till Valhalla.
All right, so the Vikings. Obviously, first guy, Dalvin Cook. I personally would consider choosing him over CMC. Puts up huge numbers each week, really, no matter what. Only potential issue with him is the same with a lot of other running backs like him, where you have some injury issues, and his huge volume isn't doing him any favors. Now, I wouldn't be too worried about anybody coming in and taking his job. Madison had that chance last year when Cook went down and did not seize that opportunity. Some people, such as myself, wasted a waiver wire ad on him just to be horribly disappointed. But you can't go wrong with Dalvin Cook. If you have the number 1 pick, I'd strongly consider taking him over CMC. Can't go wrong with either one. Justin Jefferson is second. He had a fantastic rookie year. He showcased his agility, his hands, his big play ability, and that's with just Kirk Cousins throwing him the football. And Cousins is serviceable, and that's all that this guy needs to put up big numbers week after week. I think last year he had a 70% catch rate and was averaging just under 16 yards per target. The only things holding him back on this team are the other weapons, like Dalvin Cook and Adam Thielen, who is the next man on the list. Thielen's definitely better looked at as a wide receiver 3 or a flex guy this year. We have seen before with Thielen and Diggs and Cook on the team at the time that they are capable of spreading the wealth and getting multiple guys to have big numbers. But Jefferson's the guy. Cook obviously gets a ton of targets, and Jefferson and Cook are both in line to get much higher volume than Thielen. So I personally wouldn't trust him as more than a flex guy. If you have him as your wide receiver 2, you could do a lot worse, but I wouldn't trust him there. And then I did pick a sleeper just because, as we have touched on a few times already, choosing a tight end after the big 3 is just a crapshoot. So Irv Smith Jr. is top of the depth charts on the Minnesota Vikings this year. He's been somewhat hyped up in the past few years, but with Kyle Rudolph there, he really didn't have a chance. But now that he's on top of the depth chart, it's possible that you could get him as a low-end tight end 1 with potential for more. We know Kirk Cousins isn't the best, so sometimes he might want to just see the big target in front of him and just dump it to him. I wouldn't put all your eggs in that basket, but if you're one of the people who just wants to wait until right at the end to get your tight end and fill up your roster in other spots, then he wouldn't be a terrible pickup.
Yeah, I do like the Irv Smith sleeper. I think that's one of your few sleepers that's an actual sleeper pick. So I applaud you for that. We haven't heard that just yet.
Everybody just laying on their pillow at night thinking, bet you this tight end could be good. There is hype. There's hype and there's hope. Yeah. Irv Smith Jr., you may not have known his name until right now watching this podcast, but he could show some promise. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm very interested to see how Adam Thielen performs on this team, because Adam Thielen has been like a solid wide receiver one until last year. And people say he's old and he's fallen off, and Justin Jefferson is so young and talented, of course, and athletic. I have no doubt Jefferson's going to eclipse Thielen as the number one on the team, barring injury or anything like that. But Adam Thielen could be an interesting flex play, like you said, Arch. He's I don't know if he's totally spent just yet. You know, his decline in popularity was really sudden for me. Like, analysts talked about Adam Thielen as like a top 5 or top 10 guy for a lot of years, and all of a sudden everybody's in love with Justin Jefferson, which I understand, but I wonder if we couldn't have a Thielen Diggs situation where I think with those two, a lot of times you saw like an up and down almost. One guy would have a great week and the other guy wouldn't. And so I'm interested to see if Kirk Cousins can keep up eating both of those guys' targets, or if Jefferson just totally supplants Adam Thielen as like the complete number one on that team, besides Dalvin Cook, of course.
Yep. I think it's going to boil down to Cousins. I think we're getting to like one of the awkward years where some of the great QBs are starting to get a little old, and the new waves are coming in, and some of them are really flopping, and some of them we have a couple that are really shining, but I feel like we're getting to the awkward years of QBs where like a lot of teams are going to be trying like new guys, and some of like the names like we talked about like Andy Dalton, like Nick Foles, who had great years a couple years ago. They're not doing great, and a lot of teams are going to be trying new quarterbacks coming up, and it's going to be a different year. I feel it's going to be like once all these like big name quarterbacks especially retire, which is going to be coming up real soon. Like your Aaron Rodgers, who knows if he's been back and forth. I'm sure we'll get to him. Who knows if he's going to be like playing or not, and Tom Brady's going to be retiring soon, and it's going to be yeah. I think we're going to be coming up to some weird QB years where some new big names are going to be coming out. Justin Fields.
Are you trying to hint at Kellen Mond, the backup for the Vikings? Had to just look up his name. I knew they drafted one this year, but
Who?
One of my personal heroes, Colin Coward, said recently that a bunch of people are high on Kellen Mond, if that's how you pronounce his name, Mond.
I believe that's correct, yeah.
And I mean, Kirk Cousins kind of sucks, so I guess if he has a few bad games and they go into a hole in that terrible division, who knows? Maybe you see a change.
I don't think they would ever do that. I don't think that will ever happen.
They
just tells me they just won't. They would ride Kirk Cousins until they finally he like has to retire at the end of the season, because it was if they play that poorly. Like I just don't see it happening.
They put so much money into Cousins, they can't say that they're wrong now. They're just like, nope.
Yeah, they have to.
Still learning the offense.
If he can
I
somehow
hear his name every year.
He's still learning the offense. Yeah, I think it's just that they threw so much money at Kirk Cousins because they were so desperate. They're like, we have, a few years ago, it's like we have a great, awesome team, but like Case Keenum is our quarterback, and Case Keenum had a fine season that year, but it's like, what could we have done with an elite guy behind center? I guess they thought that elite guy was Kirk Cousins. So, I forget his contract. It was like
It's
outrageous
probably
at the
way
time.
too
He was the
much,
highest
though.
paid guy at the time that
Mhm.
he signed that contract. I remember.
That's questionable.
And I just remember thinking, like, Kirk Cousins is the highest paid player in the NFL. Like, no wonder Aaron Rodgers is so pissed off. You know, no
makes
wonder he's
sense
so
now.
upset.
Did you see they bought him a golf cart to try to appease him? Did you see that video?
I saw that actually. That was pretty funny.
Yeah,
Oh, it's got your MVP little logo down here under your seat.
not much else, I guess, to say about like Dalvin Cook. I mean, he should be the number 1 or the number 2 guy off every draft board, probably. He's so solid and so consistent. And I did just want to remark, Arj, you fell into the Alexander Madison trap last year. I fell into it 2 years ago. I was like, oh man, this guy's a steal, because sometimes in fantasy, there's always a factor of luck, but sometimes in fantasy, all the stars align and it makes sense that someone should be good, and then they just aren't. Alexander Madison has all the stats and the opportunity. If Dalvin Cook's not on the field, it's like, this guy is going to be an RB1. You put him in and he gets you like 3 points, and it maybe we're doing this for fun, but like, it ruins your day. It really does. You're mad at him
because you're so excited earlier in the week that you get him off the waiver wire, and then on Sunday it's just like this guy.
Just crash and burn.
Yep. Yeah. Well, we were bringing up Aaron Rodgers. I don't know. Does anyone else have anything to say about the Vikings?
I think Aaron Rodgers is like the elephant in the room that needs
All right.
addressed.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack here, so I'll get into it.
Unpackers.
Good
Right.
one.
Thank you. Taking my subtlety, which was already down to like a 3, and turning it to like a 1. You know, like making you pun people. Yeah. The Packers. They've been the talk of the offseason, right? There's always one team that's like the drama team of the offseason. I felt like last year it was probably the Buccaneers with the whole Brady thing, and the year before that it was the Raiders with Antonio Brown, and this year it's all about Aaron Rodgers and how he only dates women who are like 10s, right? It's all about, like, is he coming back? Is he playing? And Aaron Rodgers dropped a bombshell during the NFL draft where he released it through Adam Schefter, I believe. Like, minutes before the draft started, he made like a public announcement that he didn't want to come back and play for the Packers this year. He was unhappy with the team and he just didn't want to come back. And that he would consider retiring before coming back to playing with them. And there was definitely revenge play on the Packers in the 2020 draft, drafting Jordan Love instead of a weapon for Aaron Rodgers, instead of another wide receiver or anything else. Taking Jordan Love with their, it was like with their first pick, right? That they took Jordan Love.
They traded. I think they traded up a few spots to get him.
Just like, and clearly not telling Aaron Rodgers about that, and he was pissed. So he got him back this year, and ever since then the media has been all over, like, is he coming back? And of course for fantasy it throws everything off, because top players on the Packers are all extremely fantasy relevant every year. But if it's Jordan Love under center instead of Aaron Rodgers, that changes a lot. Right, and it also is like, well, where does Aaron Rodgers go? Is that going to affect if he goes to the Broncos? But we all breathe a sigh of relief. I think everything's been worked out for this season. I don't know where Aaron Rodgers goes in the future. There's rumors about retirement. I tend to think he's probably going to end up on another team next year, but this is about the 2021 season. And what we know is that he's going to be back.
I got a question for you, Matt.
Okay.
Tantrum or justified? How do you feel about it? Like from what you've seen, do you think he's just being kind of a drama queen? Do you think this whole argument's justified?
It's a lot of fun to say he's a drama queen, right? It's a lot of fun because Aaron Rodgers is like puts up really elite numbers and really elite stats, but he's only had like one Super Bowl. So I think a lot of people just get annoyed with his BS because you're always hearing about him, and then
That darn cheesehead.
and you're like, oh, but this guy's acting like he's the best quarterback in the league, but he has the same amount of Super Bowl wins as like Pat Mahomes, who's only in his third year or fourth year. It's going to be embarrassing if I messed that up on this podcast. But
We'll cut you some slack. Don't worry.
Rodgers is coming back for this year. Him and Devontae Adams posted on Instagram, Michael Jordan and Scottie Pippen for one last dance, right?
Yeah.
And he's in training camp. He worked out some crazy deal with the Packers where they just gave in to a bunch of like little demands, it seems. Like they got him the golf cart, like Luke said, and they got Randall Cobb back.
Yeah, that was an
Which
interesting
was really
one.
funny, I guess. I have a feeling that's less a football thing and more like Randall Cobb needed a job, and Aaron Rodgers is like his buddy, and he's like, dude, these guys, I got them eating at the palm of my hand. I'll get you a job, buddy. Randall's
telling
like,
me-
"Hey, thanks, man."
You're telling me
golf
Randall
cart
Cobb
people
isn't one of your people?
All right, let me get into my people. So the first player I want to talk about is Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams is currently listed at an ADP of 10. It's funny because my second guy is listed at 11. So these guys are like, you can argue about who should go first, but Devontae Adams is on most people's draft boards as the wide receiver 1. And that is because he posts incredibly elite numbers. I have his stat lines from like last year here where he averaged 17.4 points per game and he only played like 14 games. He had 148 targets and got 1,374 receiving yards and 18 touchdowns. So
Jesus Christ.
that's a lot. And you remember how I mentioned earlier that Travis Kelce was almost the top receiver last year, and it's because in the final week, I believe Devontae Adams beat him out as getting just a few more yards than him. So it's debatable, I think, between Devontae Adams and Tyreek Hill as to who's the wide receiver 1 this year, but history doesn't lie. Devontae Adams gets a lot more volume. That's his bread and butter, is that he gets a ton of volume on this team. He's the number 1 target. Aaron Rodgers looks to him every single play. And he's got the volume and he's got the talent to capitalize on that opportunity. His other big takeaway besides volume is touchdowns. Like, he gets an obscene amount of touchdowns. Even in a down year, he's getting such a huge target share of the touchdowns. He's the type of player who is just accumulating massive amount of points. And I bring that up because a lot of analysts will tell you got to draft running back heavy early on. And you see Devontae Adams sitting up there in the rankings in round 1. I've seen him listed as like the 5th overall guy in a PPR league.
I have him listed as 9.
Yeah,
yeah.
And then I've seen like ADP as 10 or 9, like around there. And so I just have noted that he's going in the back half of first rounds, and I think that that's where he should go. I think there are 4 or 5 really elite running back talents that are locked and loaded that you should be taking before him. After those guys, I think Devontae Adams is a fair pickup because of the amount of points he's just going to get you. Having 17 guaranteed 17 points coming your way like just about every week is huge. So the number 1 target on an elite offense. And what more can I even say about it? I guess I'll move into the second guy who is ranked just below him at 11.
I got a question for you real quick about before we
Yeah.
move on. Does just to bring this back up again, does the Rodgers hissy fit give him any, devalue at all? Do you think? What if we get halfway through the season and Rodgers throws a fit again?
I can get more into Aaron Rodgers because spoilers, he's going to be my third player that I talk about. But I think that the Rodgers hissy fit, as you call it, we don't know all of what's going on behind the scenes. From what I can tell, a lot of the Rodgers drama that happened it's been building for a few years. Rodgers not getting along with the coaching staff because I think Rodgers wants to play a different style football than what the Packers organization is more accustomed to. I think Rodgers wants to sling it and be a little more aggressive, and the Packers, through Mike McCarthy and Matt LaFleur, want to be a little more conservative in their play calling. And Rodgers is sort of a big enough name that he can use his star power in the media to muscle around his team. And I think the second big fracturing is that the Packers just won't draft like a lot of wide receivers or elite wide receiver talents. And
All they gave him
Jordan
was
Love
Devontae
thing.
Adams.
What's that?
I said all they gave him was Devontae Adams. That's
Right. Yeah.
And
well,
Randall Cobb, of course,
yeah.
Right. Devontae Adams, of course, is like an elite player, but he, especially with the Jordan Love situation, like they're jumping spots, and everybody thought, oh, well, they're going to take a big weapon here. And then when they took Jordan Love, I remember Packers fans just being like pissed off because it's like, what are we doing? It's hard to tell whether it's justified or not because I don't know all of what's going on behind the scenes. The Packers organization,
get where Rodgers is coming from.
Yeah, the Packers organization could be reasonable, and Rodgers is throwing a tantrum, but he could have thrown a much bigger tantrum than he did. And I do think there is a part of him that really liked the attention this year and definitely played it up a lot. Like he did that golf outing with Tom Brady, and there was a whole lot of theatricality going on there. I think he does like that, and doing the Jeopardy thing as well. Like he made it a point to put himself in the news, I think, a lot. As far as how it affects fantasy this year, I really have no reason to believe that Aaron Rodgers doesn't come out and play his average season this year. I mean, last year looked at his stats, and last year was the second best year that Aaron Rodgers has ever had as far as fantasy points go. He was on fire. He was playing electric, and that affected Devontae Adams' numbers and everybody else's numbers on the team. And I have no reason to believe that. Obviously, he'll regress a little bit from that probably, but his average is still incredible. Like I have his average points throughout his whole career I have written down here. It's like his last year it was 24 points per game, and over his whole career, his average points per game has been around 17. So, and that's including his terrible first year or whatever. So he's an elite quarterback. I guess we're on him, so I'll just finish covering him. His ADP has him listed as I have that written down here. His ADP is listed as 54, and they have him listed as the 4th or 5th running back, or ESPN has him as the 7th quarterback, which I think is underselling it a little bit because last year he finished as the 2nd quarterback overall. I was surprised to see that beat out, or the 3rd. Sorry, he finished beneath Josh Allen and Kyler Murray as the 3rd quarterback. And I think you're going to see Rodgers come out and play a good season. I see no reason that he quits, and in fact, he might be more inclined to say F it when the coach calls a play that he doesn't like, because whether he's leaving the team to go somewhere else or retiring, he's got no incentive to try and play nice necessarily. So, yeah. And as long as he's playing well, they're not benching him for Jordan Love. People would go insane. So I think you're going to see good numbers again from Devontae Adams, a lot of volume. I think you're going to see good numbers from Aaron Rodgers again. And he's going in like the 4th or 5th round. I'm someone who personally likes to wait a little longer to draft their quarterbacks, but that's where he's going, and it's a good value. And in the new season that's going to be 18 weeks long this year, I think quarterback is going to be more important, and Rodgers is unarguably one of the best quarterbacks in the league, I think, just based on efficiency and statistics. And that translates into his fantasy numbers. So the third and final guy I did want to talk about was Aaron Jones. Aaron Jones and Devontae Adams, you can argue who should go first. I guess it depends on your draft strategy. Aaron Jones, his ADP right now lists him as 11 overall, but I've seen him ranked as high as like 5th or 6th overall, depending on people's preferences, I'd say. He has potential to be, I think, a steal in this draft in a way, because if you can get him in the 2nd round, I mean, he's a guy who could, I think, has a really good opportunity to finish as a top 5 running back overall. And if you can get a guy like that in the like top of the 2nd, that's a big steal. And if Devontae Adams makes his bread and butter on volume and touchdowns, Aaron Jones makes his on receptions. He's smaller than a lot of running backs. People comp him to Alvin Kamara in his play style. He catches a lot of passes and he dodges a lot of tackles. And that makes him extremely valuable for fantasy. When a running back is like that, when they're a little guy that catches passes and gets a lot of yards after the catch, it's sort of like a cheat code for fantasy in a way, because he's just getting extra points added on. Now, he had to split targets last year with Jamal Williams, and they got rid of Jamal Williams this year. I think he's on the Lions now, isn't he?
He is, yes, sir.
Yeah. And people were very happy because Jamal Williams kind of sucks, so they were tired of seeing him vulturing stuff. 2 years ago, in the 2nd round, the Packers did pick up, what is his name?
A.J. Dillon.
A.J. Dillon, thank you. Yeah, they did pick up A.J. Dillon in the 2nd round, and A.J. Dillon, he had a decent, he played like 11 games last year, and he put up some decent numbers in like the little target share that he got. So there is a chance that we see A.J. Dillon eating into Aaron Jones's timeshare on the field. I think at the beginning of the season, though, Aaron Jones is going to be getting a vast majority of the work, and even when A.J. Dillon comes in and gets a little bit more of the rushing game, Aaron Jones is still getting the passes. Like, he's an incredible pass catcher, and I think that provides you with such a secure floor. Only thing I'm worried about is touchdowns. That's it. Is A.J. Dillon coming in and vulturing goal line touchdowns from Aaron Jones? But I think a lot of that Jamal Williams stuff you see happen is because of like the more conservative coaching style from the Packers staff, the stuff that irritates Aaron Rodgers. And so maybe if Aaron Rodgers is going renegade and gunslinging, he might just he likes Aaron Jones, so he might just hand it off to him.
Yeah. Well, I would just like to say one thing. Fuck Aaron Rodgers. I think it's 100% a tantrum and not justified at all. No weapons, my ass. You just listed 2 of the best offensive players in the league. I mean, and he doesn't own the team. He doesn't run the team. He doesn't need to be told that this is happening. It's not his decision, and he's just a baby. And
I thought you were a quarterback guy, Arj. Man, that's crazy, dude.
I'm a quarterback guy, but I can't stand the guy.
So, Arj,
I understand the strong feelings on the whole situation, because he does come off as very diva-ish at times.
Yeah. So, Arj, you're saying if it came down to it when you're making your picks, would you take Tyreek Hill over Adams then? Just based off of like if you think he's going to throw another tantrum or not.
it's the thing that sucks about that question is that in our fantasy league, those are going to be two of my options, right where I'm picking. And
Does that
I
influence
Pick right
your
after
decision?
you ours. Let me
Yeah.
write. What are you picking?
it does. It is in my head. I don't know which decision I would make yet, but that is definitely in my head because another way
We
to
don't
think
wanna tell
about it.
Matt.
Oh no, that's part of it. But and the other way to think about it is that there's still the Devonte Adams contract situation going on right now. Why would he sign? He knows that Aaron Rodgers doesn't want to be there after this year, so he's not going to sign a long-term contract. Or I guess NFL players nowadays sign the big contract and then cry about it the next year and get traded. But
Hey, you could do the Antonio Brown hissy fit, and then you end up on
Mhm.
the team you wanted at the end, like 2
Oh,
years
yeah.
later.
A lot of people think that Adams is coming back for a year, and then the two of them together will end up going to a different team
How
as
cute.
as a package deal. Yeah, so friendship bracelets all
I
around.
mean, I do like Adams.
If
I-
you're sick of hearing about Rodgers now, just wait till that trade happens in the offseason next year, and everybody just it'll be like Brady going to the Buccaneers, where you just won't stop hearing about it.
You know what I'm
Oh.
glad about? It's not the Steelers dealing with a tantrum for a change.
Oh. Yeah, that is nice, isn't it? The only other Packers player I wanted to mention, then maybe we can discuss it a little bit. So I had a couple honorable mentions. I wanted to say AJ Dillon I mentioned. I don't think AJ Dillon's in like a redraft league. I don't think he's very relevant as anything more than a handcuff. There's a chance he gets some volume toward the end of the season, but probably shouldn't worry about it unless you're in like a dynasty league. Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, both deep plays. I think Randall Cobb's ADP is like number 254.
Yeah.
So if you want him,
Deep,
you can
deep,
take him
deep
after
sleeper.
your kicker, people. I will warn you though. You can look at his stat lines. I mean, he's posting like 6 or 7 points a game, like, which as a wide receiver is not good. You can find better people to put in your flex there.
I've used them as like an emergency flex. I feel like
Yeah.
like someone on my team. I had like 2 people in my injury reserve, and I just needed someone to get through a game. and I
Played
picked
for the
him up.
Packers for a lot of years, and Aaron Rodgers he was a decent flex play a few years ago, but I think that ship has sailed. I think he's a little older now, and I don't see him coming back and suddenly being relevant in this backfield. And then Alan Lazard is an interesting guy to watch, but again, for the purposes of a redraft league, I don't think anybody listening should be worried about Alan Lazard. Like, he's a player who some weeks is going to get a deep catch from Aaron Rodgers and get 10 points, and then other weeks it might give you like nothing. So sleeper, and I was judging this based on who is going later and might present a better value for you later on. My sleeper is Robert Tonyan, a tight end. Last year, Tonyan was sort of a breakout. I believe I have to double check this because I'm still not believing it. He finished as like the number 3 end ADP.
Really?
Like, yeah, in
I'm
PPR
double checking
leagues,
currently. Don't worry.
ESPN.
Yep, number 3.
He
PPR scoring. He finished as the number 4, not number 3. In
Okay,
PPR
sorry.
scoring.
So the number 4 guy, probably under, because Kittle was injured last year, so probably under Kelsey, Waller, and Hawkinson, probably.
Logan Thomas actually third by like
Thomas.
a tenth of a point, or
Yeah.
like it was.
So-
they both had 176, but Thomas had like the extra.
I was shocked
sliver of a
double
point there.
checking that. And of course, Robert Tonyan has some hype because everybody likes George Kittle, and him and George Kittle were roommates in college. It's just like they're both big himbo boys, just like you can picture them doing the Da Vinci TikTok together. So it's just kind of fun to picture them, just 2 big giant men catching footballs out there on the field. And Robert Tonyan, he had sort of a breakout season last year. Like I said, finishing high, and he had an average of 11 points per game. PPR scoring last year. I mean,
Yeah,
For a tight end,
for the
that's
tight
pretty
end
solid.
graveyard, that's pretty decent.
yeah, but you have to. I don't have the stats in front of me, but you have to look at it also as a week by week because he ended with 11 touchdowns last year, and I think 4 or 5 of them came in one game.
I think you are right. Where I remember there was like he had a
Could be.
few like he didn't come on till like mid-ish season, but I think he did have like 2 games where he like completely like popped off, and I'm sure that inflates his number a bit. And but I mean, if he's at least the first tight end on that team now, maybe he's a decent sleeper.
Right, and mentioning the touchdowns and maybe getting more booming and busting in certain games. Bring Tunyon up as a sleeper because the tight end landscape is so bad, and Tunyon has shown he can perform well on what is going to be one of the best offenses in the league this year, most likely. What we can reasonably assume, and I just think like if you don't feel like spending a lot on an early guy, and if you don't feel like taking a risk on someone like Kyle Pitts or TJ Hawkinson in a mid-round, Tunyon is like one of the cream of the crops for these graveyard tight ends.
One of your end of the draft.
It's not
guys.
usually the term I use for them, but I'm being child-friendly here. The graveyard tight ends, you're sort of going with at the end.
Now, say what you would say. I have no idea.
Don't worry,
Oh,
we can mark
shit.
this. There you go. We can mark it as explicit on YouTube. It's okay.
Dog shit tight ends, who you are throwing a dart. You know, you're mixing up my phrases here, but you're just throwing it to the wall and seeing what sticks. And Onion has shown he can perform well. He's on a good offense, so it's like, hey, if you're stacking your team in the earlier rounds and you want to take this guy, I think he's going off the board at 113 right now is his ADP. The only downside to Tunyon I will mention, besides the fact that he's a sleeper, so the boomer bust is kind of inherent in it. The only downside I will mention is that he does have some hype. Like, people remember his season last year, and so he might not be going off your board at the very end of drafts. People might grab him early, especially if you play with people who are a little more casual. You see all the tight ends coming off the board, they start to panic, so they grab Robert Tunyon, and then all of a sudden your plan is foiled, and
people
you
just
gotta
sorting
look at
by
Irv Smith
fantasy
Jr. or
points.
whatever.
Yeah, you're sorting by fantasy points in like those late rounds, and you're like, oh, this guy, man, he had a bunch of points. This isn't a bad idea. And to confirm
Hunter Henry go to the Patriots.
Did what?
Him and Jonnu Smith.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you're looking at Jonnu and Hunter Henry, and you're like,
Let me tell you about a tight end, okay? Who's about that after week 2 is gonna have a great QB throwing to him. We got Cole Kmet on the Bears. Once Justin Fields takes the field.
I thought you were about to jump to a different team. I was like, Lucas, these are divisional episodes. What are you doing?
Yeah,
I thought he was going somewhere else with the tight
You got
end.
my guarantee. He's boom or boom after week 2.
I mean, the only other tight end on the Packers is you're looking at Mercedes Lewis, and I was like, is that where we're going with this? I don't know what's happening here.
Mercedes Lewis is like a porn star name.
I was about to say, I don't think I would ever draft somebody named Mercedes.
To confirm the stat Arj was mentioning earlier, Tunyon did have 3 touchdowns in week 4 against the Falcons. He had six catches on 6 targets for 98 yards and 3 touchdowns for 33.8 fantasy points.
Yeah, I picked him up the week after, and he got like.
The next week he had 5.5, then 5.2. He went up to 13 points, then back down to 1.5, and then 6.
Well, he was better than Evan Ingram, so.
That's true.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to say is when you're in like the graveyard shift there, and you're sifting through these like
especially
relatively
tight ends,
unknown tight ends, it's like
dog shit.
Yeah, if you can get a guy that's getting like 5 points and then 11 points, you might consider it a win.
Yeah,
because
the boomer bust is like amplified with those like back end like tight ends.
Plugging Jonnu Smith in last year, and he did they handed the ball to him for a rush. I think He caught one pass for 1 yard on one of his games, and he ended with like a 1.1, and I just remember being so depressed. Come on, Jonnu. What are you doing to me? So Robert Tunyon might give you some of those days, but I figured the other three Packers were so like no-brainer, locked and loaded people because the whole offense runs through those three guys basically. Shout out to some of the Packers receiver core though that have some of the goofiest names, like some of the most memorable names.
crazy,
I always remember like when Devontae Adams gets injured sometimes. These people start to get put on your news feed and you're like, oh my god, I have to remember like I'm not gonna put Geronimo Allison or remember Marquez Valdez
Scantling, yeah.
Nah, I'm not trying to make fun of anybody, but like you don't know these people and all of a sudden Matt Berry is on your screen being like, maybe take a look at Marquez Valdez Scantling this week, and you're like, I gotta rewind that. What did you just tell me? Like, so I don't know. Robert Tunyon, I think decent sleeper for when we're looking at the Packers.
Yeah, I know Aaron Jones is pretty obvious no-brainer, but I think with Jamal Williams gone now, he had like about 100+ attempts last year. I don't think A.J. Dillon's gonna get. I think he's gonna get some obviously because he's literally their next running back up. But I don't think Aaron Jones is unreasonable for him to be a top 5 running back for sure. I mean, I think the top 5 when it comes to drafting is pretty locked in, but I'm not going to be shocked if that situation in New Orleans doesn't work out without Breeze and now no Michael Thomas potentially, and Kamara has good season obviously, but I think Jones could easily at least be in the very worst of a situation. He's in the position to have like a insanely good season. So I think getting him like, I don't recall the ADP you mentioned, but I think it was like end of the first round. If you get him in our league being a 12-man, if someone gets him at the end of the first round, I think that's definitely like a steal for sure.
It's definitely a good pick.
Yeah, I can't justify taking him over some of the other guys, but it wouldn't be the worst.
Well, I want you to picture someone like Saquon Barkley, who has a lot of injury concerns revolving him right now. Obviously, probably would not be questionable if he was fully healthy because he's really good. But Saquon Barkley's starting to go at the end of the first now. Austin Eckler, someone who's got a lot of question marks surrounding him, starting to go at the end of the first round now. Aaron Jones is going around those guys, and I just think someone who's has like the floor that he's shown to have had, I think he's a really good pickup, and I think Devontae Adams is very safe, and Aaron Rodgers, like I said, I normally don't like to. Sometimes I do it in panic, but I normally don't like to bite on QBs in the middle rounds personally. But if
I agree with that.
Or if it works out that way,
I think he can burn you this year for sure. Like that could be.
I think he's a safe guy. I think he's a safe bet.
Yeah, if you get him at the correct spot, I would agree because he had such a good season last year. I don't know. I wouldn't be shocked if someone took him definitely above where I would want to take him, and it wouldn't really live up to that ADP. Yeah. Even though he finished as like the third quarterback, I'm not expecting that again. So if he is a third quarterback off the board, I think that's a mistake. But if he goes closer to like 8th or 9th quarterback, I think that makes sense, and he'll be consistent enough for it to like actually work out.
I think with our league, he's going to come off the board before I would take him. Personally.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's probably the case for all 4 of us. So that's
probably fair enough.
It'll be a Molinaro brother.
I was overall thinking.
Yup. I could see Adam. Remember when Adam didn't know?
Didn't he take him first round?
Yeah, it was our first year doing it. He took Aaron Rodgers in like the first round.
It was like 4th overall too. It was a good pick.
He blames me. If you're watching this, I'm going to call you out a little bit because he blames me because I was coaching and I mistakenly told him it was standard scoring when it was PPR.
At least that explains it a little bit, you know.
He goes, I took him because I thought it was standard and I didn't think it was PPR, and I'm like, think about that though, and I'm like, you took him so early though. Is it really that? Is PPR? He's not a wide receiver.
It's not that
Like,
different. Like,
It's not that
It's
different
not.
for a quarterback.
It's a little bit better, but it's
Yeah, so I think that was just a result of wanting. It was a lot of our first years playing, so we didn't know totally what was going on, and I think that was just a case of who's a really good player in the NFL. Aaron Rodgers. I think I'll take him.
well, didn't you ask him? You're like, "What are you doing?" At first, didn't the first thing he said back to you, he's like, "Playing to win."
yeah.
Great.
All right. Well, so we covered the NFC North and Adam not being good at drafting, so I think that's a good
Yeah,
way to end
that
it.
could really benefit me with them picking before me, man. I could have a real steal there at 4.
Yep. Well, Matt, Lucas, thanks for joining us.
you
Check
for
their
having me.
check their channels out. We'll link them in the description. Any closing thoughts, Matt or Lucas?
I would just say, I will thank you for having me on. I'll definitely come on again if you want. It's always fun to talk fantasy. I'm starting to feel the burn, the itch, if you will. I'm ready. I'm ready
Dog,
to
I'm
get into this.
about to hit a mock after this, 100%. Dude. I
Yeah,
swear.
right. This got me
Just-
jonesing for a mock.
Yeah.
man.
Yeah, I like just started getting back into it like again this week. Like just started doing some of my research for the year, and I try to go into the draft not overloading myself like I did that one year, and it was a train wreck. I look forward to the exciting NFC North this year. But big contention between the 4 teams.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be special. Well, thanks guys for joining us, and thanks everybody for watching. We'll see you with the next episode of. Don't know what it's gonna be yet. It'll be a surprise.
We'll figure it out.
All right. Peace.
See you guys.